page 123, Perek Yud, Nisogim B'Talich HaGeula, retreats in the process of redemption. Ilule shenefalti lo kamti. If I hadn't fallen, I wouldn't have gotten up. Until now, we have been clarifying the stages of redemption, the beginning of which is the return of Am Yisrael to its land, to her land, the return to national values. And we have seen these things being realized in the last few generations. The Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael, its construction was done with love, Mesiras Nefesh, self-sacrifice. But now, today, last few years, we have been put in a situation where it seems to question our relationship, of our understanding to what we're seeing. We are seeing a retreat from national values to the relationship to the land of Israel, from Zionistic values, whether they're religious or secular. It pains us when we say the expressions that we're seeing today. It would appear that this is a challenge to our understanding of the redemption, that the return to Eretz Yisrael and the return to national values is supposed to bring in its wake a spiritual tshuva. As we already quoted the Or Sameach as saying in his commentary on Devarim Perek Lamed, that source 1, Ki achrei asher yashuv elamo, betach yashuv el elokav. That after we have returned, after Klal Yisrael has returned to its nation, to its land, it is clear that she will return to her God. But we see that there is a retreat from this. And not only a spiritual retreat, but a giving up of a reversal of national values. How do we understand this? First, we have to remember that the first principle that we started our study of religious Zionism is the quote from the Yerushalmi in Brachos, Perek Aleph Halacha Aleph, that Rabbi Chia Rabbah said that just like the dawn comes slowly, so too the redemption comes Kima Kima, comes step by step, that you can't expect it to come immediately at one time, and that's not the way it functions. And in this process, you also have descents, retreats, but nonetheless, it is a process that's leading to redemption. The comparison of redemption to dawn, or pre-dawn to dawn, is not just in terms of the fact that the light comes slowly, but it's also into the fact that it's not only light, but you have darkness and light mixed up. We also at the time quoted the pasuk from Hosea, Lo Yom Velo Laila, that it is a day. Redemption is a day that is not day or night. Sof Hayom Yeh Or, and at the end of the day there is light. And Rashi said that we're not talking about a day, we're talking about a period of time. But again, when you think about day, it is a period of light. And Hosea says that Geula is neither day nor light. There are times that are going to be good, there are times that are going to be not so good, because it is a combination, the Malbim there said, of redemption and exile that are at the same time. Ula b'sof hayom, and when the day of the process of redemption is over, then there will be absolute light. At the beginning of the dawn, it's still shadowy, and dark. And it's only when the process of redemption is completed that we get to see the light. The Eim Hapnim Smecha, our second source, also stressed this idea. The Ha'omer Sharishita Geula Tiye Al Yedei Mashiach ben David. And if you say that the very beginning of the process of redemption is through the Mashiach, the Anointed One, the son of David HaMelech, K'fi shemekavim dalei as amei haaretz, as is the hope of the low, ignorant people, Hu kamisha omer shekodem or haboker yizrach hashemesh. This is like it has the same logic as someone would say, before dawn, the sun shines. Shem Devarim B'Telim Umuvutalim. That these are words that are void and negated. That this adds to our understanding that there are descents, just like there are ascents, there are descents in the process of Geula. But these descents do not stand opposed to the process, but they are part of the process itself. This process of ascent and descent is like a flag waving and showing that the Geula is coming. Because each one of these retreats puts in place the doorway to advances. We are taught by Chazal in the Yalkut Shimoni, source 3, Al tismechi oivaiti li, ki nefalti kamti, ki eshev b'choshech Hashem orli. That my enemies should not rejoice over me. Because I fell, I got up. Because I sat in the darkness, God is my light. Ilule shenefalti lo kamti. If it had not, what it just had was a pasuk from Micha, Perek Zayin, pasuk Ches. If I had not fallen down, I wouldn't have gotten up. Ki eshev b'choshech Hashem orli. That when I sat in the darkness, God was my light. Ilule sheyashavti b'choshech lo haya orli. If I had never sat in the dark, God never would have been the light for me. When we first look at these words of the rabbis, it's very difficult. It's clear that when we study these words in a simple way, if I had never fallen down, I wouldn't have needed to get up at all, right? You only have to get up off the floor because you fell onto the floor. If you hadn't fallen onto the floor, you wouldn't need to get up. If the room weren't dark, you wouldn't have to turn on the light. So what are Chazal trying to tell us? There is something very deep hidden here. And that is, if I hadn't fallen, I couldn't have gotten to the level that I'm found at now. That when you fail at something, when you suffer a defeat at something, the result that comes out of the falling brings us to a higher level than we could have achieved if we had never fallen. And this higher level is ultimately what we're trying to get to. You know, this is also true in Limud HaTorah. A traditional part of Limud HaTorah is that Talmidim present their ideas to their Rebbe, who rips them apart, and then they have to rebuild them again, and rebuild them again, and rebuild them again until they can make the idea solid, make the idea stand up. It's also true here that there must be challenges to each advance, and when those challenges are overcome, then you can get to a place, then Klal Yisrael can get to a place where otherwise it wouldn't have been able to get to. The second section in the 10th Perek, Nishmat HaTzionut, the Zionistic soul. When we are going to look at the nature of the realization, in fact, of what it means to have a Zionistic soul. Rav Kukler writes in a letter, source 1, Ha'uma b'klala, the nation in general, im kol godla v'chasna haruchanit, with all its greatness, with everything that is spiritually hidden within it, im kol ga'on nishmata, in all the brilliance of its soul, lo tuchal b'shum ofen liot mitzamtzemet rak b'ha'uga hatzara shel chalomo shel Dr. Herzl Zatzal. It is not capable of being limited to the small circle that was the dream of Dr. Herzl. Im kol yafyo v'uzo, with all of its beauty and strength, lefi ha'erech, according to its value, hatzionut ha'ma'asit v'ha'iyunit, practical and, let us say, theoretical Zionism, ha'politit v'ha'diplomatit, political and diplomatic Zionism, v'kol anvaha yachad, and all of its branches together, kamosh yatzu min ha'koach el ha'poel ad hayom, as it has come from theory to practice until this day. Yesh bem inyanim niskavim v'ne'elmim, there are things within it that are sublime and lofty. Shanu nikram im mimakei haviyatenu ha'yisraelit l'tomcham b'chol kochotenu hagashmim v'aruchanim, that we must, with all of our Israelite being, support them with all our powers, with all our strength, with all our abilities, both physically and spiritually. Aval kol ele yachad einam ki im haguf hatzioni, but this is only the Zionistic body, physical body. Aval kruyim anu miyad lizrok et neshama behagoya chotevet hazot, but we are called to throw into this gviya, into this corpse, its neshama. If you think when God created man, first he created the physical body and then he breathed the neshama into it. So too here you have, Rav Kook is saying, the creation of the physical body of Zionism, and we have to breathe into it the spirit of Zionism. Kadei shetieh ruya be'emet lishma, so that it will be fitting for its name, Zionism. Shemakor hatzionut hu amakor hakadosh ha'elyon hatanach, because the source of Zionism is the source of holiness, the highest source of holiness, which is the Bible. Lo heid kol sha'am shanui ba'olam holech levakesh lo miklat batuach mirodvav levado. It is not only the nation is looking for a refuge, a certain refuge from those that chase it, this is some of the early religious Zionists argued that the purpose of modern political Zionism was to give the Jews a refuge where they could be in peace without pogroms all the time until Mashiach would come. Ela shegoy kadosh, but it is a holy nation. Segulas ha'amim, the chosen among the nations. Aryeh Yehuda, the lion cub of Yehuda. Ne'or mitar demato, she will wake up from her slumber. Haruka, her long slumber. V'inehu holech v'shav el nachlato el gaon Yaakov asher ahev selah. And she will return to an inheritance, the excellency of Yaakov that she loved, Selah. This is, of course, one of the psukim that we say before reading the blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah. We see that there are two practical aspects to Zionism. The first one is the body, the Zionistic body. The reality that Jews are going to their land. They're building it, and the Jewish people is returning to its national values. The second is the soul of Zionism, the deep content of the redemption of Israel, according to which the return of Israel to its land is not only fleeing from the difficulties of exile, but is also being a goy kadosh segulas amim, a holy nation, a holy people chosen among the nations. Gur Aryeh Yehuda, the lion cub of Yehuda, that is waking up from its long slumber, and it is going to return to its land so that it can fulfill its great purpose. The beginning of the process of redemption, which is also a process of tshuva, is building the Zionist body, even without a soul. But when it comes time that this is not sufficient for Israel, at that point she requires her soul. The self-sacrifice of Israel for the land of Israel over the last few generations was to build up the Zionistic body. The first time I was in Israel was in the 70s. And it didn't feel like I was in a first world country when I was first there. There were some things that were modern, just like any place in the world. You go to any international airport, any place in the world, it feels pretty modern, more or less. There were modern type buses that picked you up at the plane and drove you to the terminal and so on. But in other ways, it seemed not so. I remember the posters in the post office about the order to receive telephone service in your house. And the first person on the list was the Prime Minister, right? And after that was the Defense Minister and the Foreign Minister and then the Chief of Staff of the Army. And you have this poster that's filled with, 12-point type. It's a huge poster, normal-sized poster, filled with 12-point type listing this long, long list of, precedents to receiving phone service. And it ended with kol echad acher, everyone else. Anyone that's not listed here, this is your place at the very end. But that you wouldn't dream of today. Phone service is instant. Both landlines and cell phones and so on and so forth. It's something that we take for granted. For all intents and purposes, Israel is now a first world modern country. The body has been complete in terms of that. And now, the nation wants to suckle its Zionistic spirit. And according to this, the physical Zionistic body, the state, in and of itself, without anything else, is no longer sufficient. And because of this, we have retreats at this point. Rav Kook Sitzal saw that this reality would be present. As he wrote in his introduction to Sefer Eitz Hadar. Sefer Eitz Hadar, which is this is our second quote, is a sefer that he wrote when he was the Rav of Yafo. It's about the mitzvah of what esrog can be used for the mitzvah of Arba Minim, and that a grafted esrog is invalid. And he goes through the analysis and showing why a grafted esrog is invalid, and he gives a very, very brief explanation of why all esrogim that don't have hashgacha today are grafted. The esrog tree lives for about 20 years. The first 5 years it doesn't give fruit at all. It's only after that it starts to give fruit. So you get fruit for about 15 years. There's really no shaila of orla because it can't grow fruit in the first 4 years anyway. And then it dies. But if you graft an esrog onto a lemon tree, just like a lemon tree can last for hundreds of years, so can the esrog last for hundreds of years. So once people learned how to graft an esrog onto a lemon tree, people growing esrogim, of course, started grafting them onto lemon trees, because instead of having to replant your orchard every 20 years, you have to replant your orchard every 150 years. Obviously a great gain. So in his introduction to the Sefer Eitz Hadar, Rav Kook writes, B'yameinu elu, in our days, these are days, talking about 1907, I believe, 1908, Asher kol ele, that all of these things, Asher chibasam Tzion haisa be'ein ruach minishmas Elokim Chaim, that the love of Zion is the spirit of the living God in them. Be'ein kedushas emes ve'emunas omen kashura bekesher amitz v'lev tahor ve'havet Elokit nitzchis. That this true sanctity and firm belief is tied with the pure heart to the love of the eternal God. Hakshura b'nishmasa u'makor hayaha shel Knesset Yisrael ladei ad is tied to the soul and the source of the Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish people, for all eternity. Shiraki omedes l'olam, only this lasts forever. Kol elu halavos harachokim mizeh, and all the hearts that are far away from this, holchim hem v'nifradim mi'al ahavas artenu hakadosha. As they go on, they will be separated from the love of our holy land. Einenu haraos, our eyes see, ki me'ahavas ha'umah, from the love of the people, the love of the nation, ha'aretz v'chibas ha'safa, and the land and the love of the language, im me'asa shel Torah, even if they find the Torah disgusting, ad sinas kol elo v'tiu uvatam, and the love of all of these things and their abominations. Urak mahalech katzar shel eze shanim ve'eze nisyonot hamaviot lidei morech lev. These things are only in a relatively short time span, historical time span, not a person's lifespan, will lead them to retreat from the values that they claim to love with a bitter heart. In other words, what Rav Kook is saying is that without the appropriate source for our love of the land, we will have a difficulty or that those people will have a difficulty maintaining for more than a few generations that love and mesirut nefesh for the land. In the end, it will lead to a bitterness and separation from the values that their parents and grandparents espoused. We have to stress that these things that Rav Kook wrote were written more than 100 years ago, a time when the love of Eretz Yisrael was deeply established in the hearts and was the wake-up call of Zionism. And it was very widely held throughout the Jewish nation, whether it was, you're talking about observant Jews or non-observant Jews. But Rav Kook could still see and detect this fact that this love that they were having and they were using to develop the land, to grow the land, wasn't eternal. And as long as it does not suckle from the Jewish soul, from a holy source, they cannot be attached permanently to the roots of the nation. And in the end, they will suffer weaknesses and descents. In another place, Rav Kook writes it in an even sharper tone. V'hayad harama, the upraised hand, source 3. Hamechumeshet b'hafkerut v'darchei hagoyim, that is arming itself with freedoms and the ways of the nations of the world. Be'ein zecher l'kedushas Yisrael be'emes, with no mention, no memory of the sanctity of Israel in truth. Hamechapeyet charisaha b'sigim shel lu'miyut, they covered their dross with a sheen of nationality, mezuyefet, which is forged, begargarim shel historia v'shel chibas hasva, with crumbs of history and love of the language, hamalbishas hachayim tzura yisraelit mibechutz, it clothes life with an Israelite form on the outside, bimkom shehapanim kulo hu eno Yehudi, and the inside of it is not Jewish. Ha'omed liot ne'apach l'mishchit l'mefletzet, l'mashchit l'mefletzet, that it will be turned into destruction and a monster. L'vesov gam ken l'sines Yisrael ve'eretz Yisrael, it will also yield a hatred of Yisrael and the land of Israel. Secular Zionism, it cannot remain in its original form. It's not a stable creature. It has to advance. It has to go up. It has to meet the soul that suckles from its roots. V'yomer Hashem el Avram, as Hashem said to Avram, Lech lecha me'artzecha, go from your land, el ha'aretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. And it is specifically in this, from this advance in the process of redemption, the process of tshuva, that opens up the Zionistic soul, this thirst for the land of Israel that is grabbed in sanctity from the deep national values. From this thirst, it is possible to break out of from the Zionistic retreats, as we have seen, that we are seeing today and in our time. The desire for the nationalism of the pioneers that were tied to the Zionistic body with the ties that they had. This is only one side of Zionism, as Rav Kook showed us. The inner desire to come to Eretz Yisrael, to be redeemed. This is in truth a desire in the Israelite soul, the soul of the nation of Israel, to become complete with the Torah, with all the details of its mitzvos. And even if these people weren't aware of that fact, of what was ultimately driving behind them, Rav Kook wrote in Orot Eretz Yisrael, source 4, Imiple be'enei kol homed mirachok. If it is a wonder in the eyes of everyone that stands from on far, איך אפשר שכל הרוחות אשר לכאורה גם מאמונה הם רחוקים? How is it possible that all of these spirits, that it seems they're far away from faith, יפעם בהם רוח החיים בכוחו הפנימי, that there will be a brilliance to their life, within them a brilliant life in their internal strength and lights. Lo levad lekirvat elokim klalit, not just a general closeness to God. Kim lachayil Yisrael hamitim, but to the true Israelite life. Tavatan shel mitzvot b'tziur u'b'rayon b'shira u'b'poel, to becoming one unit with the mitzvot, with the ideas, with the song in truth. And Rav Kook responds, Al yiplei be'enei kol hakashur b'mamkei rucho b'toch mikaha shel Knesset Yisrael v'yodea et niflot seguloteha. It will not be a wonder in the eyes of people that the connection to the deep spirit that is in the depths of the Jewish people, that knows its wonders and its destiny, perhaps. In the eyes of the people that are far from Judaism, it is a wonder. How these people that are so far from Torah, so far from mitzvos, that they say, Ani mamin belev, I believe in my heart. They don't express any desire for the mitzvahs of the Torah. But from the person that stands close by, he sees that in the depths of the Jewish people, who can recognize the wonders of the Jewish people, it's not so wondrous. He sees that things are not internally are not necessarily as they appear externally. Rav Kook Zatzal explained that the heresy that was in an entire period of heresy is actually a small form of belief. It wasn't enough for their hearts in a period of thirst for great faith, for real complete truth, that their generation then has a retreat from Zionism, meaning they were raised to look for truth, to look for absolutes. As they were raised on the goddess, so to speak, of social justice and so on, always looking to someone else and creating a yardstick that is, of course, impossible to meet, and therefore a condemnation of what had happened. Meaning, we drained the swamps, the Arabs moved in. Oh, we have to have Rahmanis on the Arabs and give them everything. However, this retreat is a small retreat. The things that flow out of this thirst for a greater Zionism, the national values that grow out of truth for a value of Eretz Yisrael in its greater sense. Rav Kook is talking specifically about the Yerida that we're seeing today, about the descent that we're seeing today, the breaking up of, quote, Zionistic values, the values of early labor Zionism, let us say. It is showing, it is a display of a desire to look at, a desire to find, a desire to see a greater inner value and importance to it. You have a collision going on. You have people that were trying to do great things without understanding the greatness of what they were doing, without understanding the implication of what they were doing. I've told this story many times, but it truly strikes me as being wondrous in many ways that it's a common occurrence. The Israeli press is outside of the cabinet meetings, in the hallway outside where the cabinet is meeting. When the cabinet ministers come out, the press immediately jumps upon them for comments. And many years ago, when F.E.A. Tom was the head of the Mafdal, Maflaka Dati Leumi, the National Religious Party, and was in the government at the time, and Peres was foreign minister, Shimon Peres was very upset about something that had happened in the cabinet meeting. And when he came out and the reporters asked him, what went on, what's happening, he said that the problem with F.E.A. Tom is he thinks Mashiach is coming and he wants to get the world ready for him. What Rav Kook is saying is that Shimon Peres, without knowing it, with his life's work, which was really for a long, long time, from before the establishment of the state until really into the 70s, he was one of the driving forces for getting material, advanced war material, and the materials that Israel needed to build a nuclear facility in Dimona. He was the one that got all of that, which was a necessary step, as we've talked about in the past, an independent Jewish state on the roadway to redemption. As Rav Herzog once wrote in a tshuva, that people that fight for a Jewish state, even though they may deny the existence of God, are nonetheless fighting for the unity of God. But their education doesn't allow them to see what they're doing, and therefore they can only see the faults in what they're doing. As they see the faults of what they're doing and challenge it because they don't understand why these things have to occur, they are suddenly thrown out. It's interesting that when Shulamit Aloni became Minister of Education in Israel, she removed all Tanakh from the curriculum of schools in Israel. She removed Jewish history. History remained. Zionist history remained. But Jewish history in general was completely and totally stripped from the curriculum of Israeli non-religious public schools. And it was only in the last government, not the one that just fell, the one before it, when Gidon Sar was Sarah Chinuch, was Minister of Education, that he started putting back Tanakh and Jewish history. But you had a generation, more than the generation, go through a school system that stripped people because of a secular ideology. It stripped people of any connection to who they were historically. And this raised a generation that challenged the right to Israel to exist. Within Israelis, you have people that are questioning. Rav Drukman was once invited to speak to a group that meets one Friday a month on Friday afternoon. That's called the Knesset of the Negev. A very important group of people involved in developing the South. And they asked him why there was such resistance and so on, Palestinian resistance, and how we have to relate to it. And he gave a parable. He said, what happens is that you're at home one night, 2 o'clock in the morning, a guy starts pounding on your door. And you go, what's going on? He says, this is my house, you have to leave. He says, this is my house, I bought it, I built it, whatever, I own the house, I'm sorry. Okay, no, it's my house, you have to leave. Eventually he goes away. Following morning, neighbors ask, what was the noise there? This Michigan guy came to my house, banging on the door, saying it's his house. The following night it happens, the following night, the following night, the following night. And finally, the neighbors are saying, give him the house already, we need some sleep. He said, that's what's happening. They're trying to wear us down, drive us out of the house. And the Knesset of the Negev is primarily a group of people from the old line of secular kibbutzim, the people that settled and developed the Negev at the very beginning, before the state existed, just after the state existed. And one of them said, but whose house is it? He was questioning his own right to the land of Israel. And Rav Drukman said there were many people that disagreed and said, no, it's clearly our house. But there were some people that said, yes, we have to question whose house does this belong to? Who does the state belong to? And this is a I would say it's close to a cancerous type of questioning of the national ethos. And this is leading us in certain directions, and we will discuss this next week.